I'm going to see if I can deliver this standing up. It's more of a stand-up sermon than last week's. And I did bring more of a stand-up chair with me. This is the chair I ate dinner in every night until I was 14 and when my sister left home. This is where I learned the multiplication tables and the desk actually in my office, and to conjugate first English verbs and then French. It's where I wrote applications to become a Rotary Exchange student and to go to college. It ought to lend me some strength. I've got it right here and my sippy cup. I promised Scott I would preach a short sermon. I failed. It's the fault of a friend of mine at GA. So this poem by Ilya Kaminsky is so powerful. All his poems are so powerful. I heard him read a week and a half ago, which was before I delivered last week's sermon, and I knew that there was an on the other hand sermon to Dayenu that needed to be preached. The poet is an amazing man, 40-ish, he's very hard of hearing, speaks perfect English with a heavy Ukrainian accent and perhaps deaf atonality. It's hard to tell if his speaking cadence is from his not hearing or his background. He passes his poems out so you can read along. He and his parents arrived in the 90s from the Ukraine as Jewish exiles. In addition to writing exquisite poetry, he is trained as a lawyer and now works with CASA in San Diego. CASA is court-appointed special advocate, and he works particularly with orphaned children in San Diego. I wasn't going to, as well as teaches in, I think, San Diego State. I wasn't going to go hear him. Katie Hayes called and said, he's a prophet. You need to hear him. You need to be in the same space with him. He needs to be in the same space with you. I don't think she was wrong. For all the wonderful things that we have looked at unflinchingly and tried to do something about, there remains much to do. A Christian writer I quite like, John Pavlovich, wrote an article about perhaps how what we needed was to become a church of not being horrible. And although he was preaching kindness, I thought it's something, but it's still not enough. There's a story going around Facebook about a bullied child who committed suicide. She had a tough life and some decent support, but the pain was too great. There was a long emotional paragraph and one last sentence. In lieu of flowers, Sadie's family simply asks that you be kind to one another. But in addition to being kind, we as community must promote a culture that is outspoken, firstly, in its refusal to see bullying as normal, and secondly, in identifying the complex issues and speaking out. We have to be those who learn about such problems, speak about them, and invite others to participate with us. Why? Because we are church, and that is how churches are called to lead. Next year, Sarah has asked that we focus on being a welcoming church, and in the deepest sense of that word, to offer space, home, welcome to people who need us, to advocate for people without those things, to ask others to join us in making room and offering shelter, to pay attention not only what our friends the Muslims need, but what to the Spanish church down the way needs and what the Black church in Milton needs, because we believe that welcoming people is important, and because we're church and that is how churches are called to lead. We're doing a lot. But there is so much more to be done. The climate for underserved and endangered populations continues to worsen in our country. We can't necessarily do more money. We're already stretching. We can, I believe, ask our neighbors, church and non-church, to participate in projects that we're doing that make a difference. But we can know more about important topics. We can make alliances. We can talk about how to make a difference. Big money is not what we have to offer. I read a startling study yesterday. This was another thing that lengthened the sermon. I should never read. The study came for Bread for the World, a faith-based anti-hunger group, which argues that the budget doesn't prioritize the poor, and the budget we have would require that every religious congregation in the country, that is each of the nation's 350,000 faith organizations, would require us each to raise $714,000 a year for 10 years to offset cuts to programs that aid the needy. I have to say that we will probably not be a full share partner in that endeavor. Now, I've mentioned the Reverend Dr. William Barber II before. He has an interesting, more ambitious agenda. He is calling us to be in solidarity with the poor, to be present to racial justice. We need to deal with the systematic racism. There are 100 million working poor in our country and 14 million poor children, and a lot teetering. Who knows how many people will not have health care? He talks about proclaiming what I would call, back from my days in the 80s, a true liberation gospel in this country of inequality. He reminds us that the word Jesus used for the poor meant those who had been made poor by exploitation. Barber calls for a moral revival, reclaiming language and purpose and intent. He tells us the power of life and death is in our tongues. He asks us to forget about party lines and be both conservative and liberal. Why not conserve justice and liberally spread it to everyone, he asks. We are all so eager, and our politicians in particular are eager to talk about the middle class, and they are hurting. But if we focus on the poor, the middle class will rise as well. He claims our language for the imperative for the poor is too puny, that we must find the flame and use it to heat up the discussion. Now we have a chalice, and we have a flame. He also cautions us about where we make these claims. He wants us to seek out the moral high ground. His son is an environmental physicist. The son suggested we stop walking in the valley because it is truly filled with snakes. Apparently on hills there is a line above which there is no longer air for snakes, but plenty for us. Walk there, Daddy, he told the good Reverend. I believe we must join that revival. We must look for the moral high ground and bring our voices and dreams of equality to that movement. Why? Because we're a church. And this valley in particular needs our voices to change. And then I got this morning from a colleague who was at GA. He's at GA. Brian Stevenson, a MacArthur Grant winner and author of Just Mercy, was the Ware lecture speaker yesterday. I believe he's also starting a museum, and it may be to poverty or to unjust. I mean, it's amazing. It's what he chose to do with his MacArthur Grant money. And I read his book, Just Mercy, 2 or 3 years ago. I really heartily recommend it to you. He's the founder of Equal Justice, which works to get undeserving prisoners off death row. He's the Ware, as I said, he was the Ware speaker last night and said there are 4 things we have to do to change the world. We must get proximate to the abused, the neglected, and the disenfranchised. We must move closer to those who have been oppressed. We must go there. We talk a lot about racial justice, but right here, we live right over the hill from a place of great inequality, which is the coal region. There is power waiting for us as we get closer to the jailed and the condemned. If we get proximate, we will discover what we have to do. That was actually my line about the coal region, not his. Sorry, we're back to him. Power waiting for us as we get closer to the jailed and the condemned. If we get proximate, we will discover what we have to do is change the world. We don't have to have the solutions first. We just have to get close. We've got to change the narratives that sustain injustice, the narratives that lay underneath the policies of fear and anger. When we allow ourselves to be afraid and angry, we tolerate injustice. We change this by changing the assumptions that underline the narratives, and we must change the narrative of race. We must acknowledge that we live in a post-genocidal society. Our country is founded on genocide, on racial terrorism, and we must start talking about it. We must change the narrative of the racial differences of people of color, that people of color are inferior and inadequate. And I would add that poor whites are lazy and unwilling to work. 3, we have to stay hope-filled. Hopelessness is the enemy of justice. You are either hopeful or you're part of the problem. We have to be the people who are hopeful that those people can change. We have to be willing. Number 4 is we have to be willing to do uncomfortable things. We have to make the choice to do uncomfortable things. We have to go to hard places and say the hard things and do the hard and uncomfortable things. If we do this, we will be broken. And in our brokenness, we are the ones who can heal the brokenness of the world, because it is in our brokenness that we heal ourselves. Only so. The opposite of poverty is justice. End quote. I also believe that our denomination must join that revival. I am grateful that Allison, Susan, and Jean put forward their names to lead this organization and stayed the course even when it became painfully obvious how much house cleaning must be done. All 3 of these women have worked very hard on our behalf, and all will continue to serve. Our prayers will be with Susan Frederick Gray as she makes her way as president. Her message to the church is that we need spiritual vitality, we need partnership and collaboration among our churches and with organizations outside our tradition, and we need a clear and compelling vision and the willingness to put that vision at the heart of who we are. Echoing Brian, we have to go where the problems are, because the world needs the message this church can bring. I believe that is true with the big C and the little c. I admit I have been ambivalent about a home. After all, I need a pulpit and a sound system. But church is more than worship. We need a place to meet about mission. We need a place to meet about learning. We need a place to plan and govern. We need a place to meet and be loving and healing and welcoming. We need a place to meet over food. And heaven knows we need a place for great yard sales. We can do this. We are church to one another. But one quick and scary stay in the hospital, reminds me to drink. And I actually see the issue of home differently. We need to build our community within our home. In 5 years, this community will look very different. Realistically, I can hope, but I'm not sure I have more than 5 years to be here. We must plan for that. We must grow new leaders, embrace ancient truths and find new ones, ferret out old and new lies, develop a deeper faith and a wider, wilder expression and application of that faith. If we do that, we will grow, and we also have to figure out how to welcome all sorts of people so we do grow in ways that are important to us. We have to be ready. Our country, and I think we can say our world, is dangerously unbalanced right now. However, it is not, as I hear so many of particularly my liberal friends saying, the time to cut and run. It's not the time to bloviate about how ridiculous others are. It's time to build coalitions. It's time to speak for those least able. It is time to build better possibilities. It is time to welcome everybody home to this place. Now, I would have told you a while ago that the one thing I never got was a revival tent. I always wanted to take Sister Fluff and the Traveling Feminist Gospel Show on the road. For a bit, when sealing a deal seemed completely impossible, I admit I went back and researched this tent structure I'd seen, and I thought, But quite frankly, I'm glad we don't have to do that. Even though I found out that the one I was looking at withstood a tornado so it just blew right around its sliffy little self. We need to remember that as an image, even if we have a brick building. But you don't need a tent to hold a revival. If the revival we're talking about is an interfaith moral revival that takes place in meeting rooms, auditoria, and in the streets, they exist. This place exists. We need new language. We need new songs. We need for our hearts to be stirred, our hands to be put to work, and our faith in new possibilities to explode. There is space in this world for prophecy. We can be witnesses to a new way. So let's buy this building already, okay? Let's turn it into a place where everyone is welcome, and let's join hands and change not only this little building, but also our country, our valley, to places where everyone is welcome. Let us be church to one another and to the world. Let us not be those who live happily during this war. Let us instead be people of peace and justice and vision. Amen. Blessed be.